listening to Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz on the Men's Radio Station. Welcome to this week's MenSpeak Radio Show. In this week's MenSpeak Radio Show, I get to hang out with my friend Malcolm Stern. Malcolm is a psychotherapist, group facilitator, author and co-founder of Alternatives. Alternatives is the UK's longest running weekly Mind, Body, Spirit events company and is internationally known as UK's landmark speaking platform for spiritual teachers, alternative thinkers, conscious business leaders and visionary thought provokers for the past 30 plus years. We're going to discuss death and transformation and how to live an authentic spiritual life, as well as get an insight into what's brewing with Malcolm, including your new book. Over to you, Malcolm.
Well, thank you. That's interesting because I'd forgotten I'd said I'm going to be talking about death and transformation, but actually my story has been sort of jettisoned into the forefront by death and transformation, so probably that's a good place to start talking. About 4.5 years ago, my daughter took her own life.
Wow.
And it's, well, of course, that's the worst thing that can happen to any human being, though there are worse things probably, but it's pretty close. And I've also started to see that there are some hidden blessings that have come in that process. And I'm very interested. I mean, the book has been inspired by Melissa's death and my journey through that process as well.
How old was she?
She was 33.
Wow.
Married the year before, went through serious mental breakdown, and then went through a real high period for about 6 months, and then an absolute crashing low for about 6 weeks, and then apparently toppled off a bridge.
Oh my God. How did you take care of yourself, your family?
There was a whole ball game I had to learn to do. At the time, I was running, when I heard about it, I was running a residential group, and I was on day 4 of a 5-day residential group, which had been running for a year. Yeah. And so I heard about it. The group came back in the afternoon, and luckily I had a psychotherapist in the group who took over the running of the group, and very wisely created a grief circle. So he and I, he called everyone out. Anyone who's lost a parent, step in. Anyone who's lost a friend, step in. And anyone who's lost a child. And I was the only person in that space. Wow. But I got to talk about it. I got to feel it straight away. And I finished the group, so it was another day. And then I went back and was with my kids, who were their stepbrother and stepsister. Half brother and half sister, I mean, and my ex-wife, who was her stepmother. And it's a very strange thing that happens with death, because the body's very wise. It doesn't let the grief in all at once. And I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't feeling that place of extraordinary grief, that you've lost one of the people closest to you in the world, someone who has your flesh and blood, and you don't feel that. You go, am I a psychopath, that I don't have any feelings? Am I some weirdo? But actually, it's a very gentle process. So a friend of mine sent me to her therapist, tried to do therapy. It was a waste of time. I was just trying in my head. And it took me 5 months to really get into my grief. And the way it happened was this. I was so angry with Melissa's mother, and I was holding her in hatred. She'd refused to allow me to speak at the funeral.
What?
She said, "You speak everywhere, you don't need to speak at the funeral." And she then sort of took centre stage. And she asked that my ex-wife not come, first of all. And I said, well, if Amanda doesn't come, I'm not coming either. And you explain why Melissa's father's not at the funeral. So she eventually agreed that she could sit not in the front row of the church where the ceremony was taking place. So
straight into family dramas.
Family dramas, and I'm going, okay, well, I'm going to look after my ex-wife because she's a really good woman, and I'm going to look after my kids. So unless they're involved in whatever way, I'm not playing. So that's all that stuff went on, and I was really, really angry and holding a real anger. And also Sue, who's Melissa's mother, had said, "Oh, well, there's nothing wrong with Melissa. She was just exhausted at the time." And I knew that she'd gone through a serious mental breakdown, serious mental health issues, and so I held her in this disrespect. And then 5 months after Melissa died, there was a Playback Theatre celebration of Melissa's life. She'd been part of that organisation. Playback Theatre play out their stuff. They play out, if you might be telling someone's story, and this was all about Melissa. And Sue unexpectedly turned up from Devon to this.
Wow.
And she started ranting at me and raging at me, and both our kids were there, her son and my son, and they held a space where they said, you don't do this. And
the kids said that.
The kids said that to their parents. And I suddenly collapsed into Sue's arms, who I had been holding with such hatred, really, and sobbed. And that was the moment that I recognised that my hatred, or my dislike, it was not quite hatred, but my absolute disdain of her had stopped my grieving process. And from that moment on, I was able to start to feel my grief.
Wow.
And then one of the things I did is I started speaking about it everywhere I could. Now, I never know what's going to happen when I'm speaking about it. I could burst into tears here. It doesn't feel like it right now. I feel like this is a different space.
Yeah.
But so I went to, and then I put myself in a whole process where I went to the Samaritans, who ran a suicide support group for people who've been bereaved by suicide. And that was amazing, because I got to hear other people's stories and got to recognise some of the things that had happened for me with Melissa. Now, when Melissa was manic, I didn't like her very much, and I felt such a sort of a sense of shame that I hadn't liked my own daughter. I'd always loved her, but I didn't like her. And then one of the women who was in the group, who'd also been, her son had died, talked about how he was obnoxious in his last few months. And actually, that gave me such a sense of relief that that's what goes on, and actually I started to sort of then go through a whole journey where I had allowed Melissa's death to educate me. And we're 4.5 years on, and I feel like I've been blessed in the process as well as bereaved in a way that no one would want and no one would ask for.
That moment at Playback, so my understanding of Playback, because I've done the training, I've known Veronica for years, I don't know of Veronica, is they played your story back to them in whatever form. And I cannot imagine what they must have played back for you, for your wife, for the whole passing, and for everything that everyone felt. It's like everyone has a different story.
That's right.
And also different layers. I mean, you've described to me different layers of this story, and the way that you have felt the rage, and obviously felt the grief, and felt the sadness, and felt everything, and now, in a way, it would be unfair to say out the other side, but life-changing.
Well, I think I am out the other side. I will grieve for Melissa all my life.
Yeah.
You don't have a loss like that where you don't grieve. But what I've done, I didn't choose to do this. It's like the universe then presented me with opportunities. So Bridget Bowen from Compassionate Mental Health rang me up, and she said, I'm running a Compassionate Mental Health conference, and I'd like you to facilitate it. She didn't know about Melissa.
Wow.
And so I facilitated this conference, and I thought I was going there to teach people.
Yeah.
I learned so much about what people had gone through. So everything came at me. So I had that. And then you start to see who your real friends are, because there's some people can't be with you. So there was one men's group I was in at the time, and there were a couple of guys in the group who I knew couldn't handle. It wasn't that I needed to talk about it all the time. I needed to be able to be with whatever was going on for me. And I knew there were a couple of guys that couldn't handle it.
Was that pretty much because they couldn't be with their own?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They couldn't be with yours?
Absolutely, that's
Simple
right.
as that.
And you learn who can be with that place.
Yeah.
So I now share a flat with my friend Julian Russell, whose brother had died through heroin overdose, but he'd gone through something of that similar space, and I was able to be with him.
Yeah.
He was able to be a good support for me. And you discover who your real friends are. You discover who can handle you. And then I started I did quite a lot of lectures, so I started doing some lectures, and all of them featured Melissa. And I needed to talk about her. And actually I realized that the biggest violence that had been done to me at that time was Sue's refusal to let me speak at the funeral. And I'd set up a ceremony myself, which my friend David Confino facilitated, where over 100 people came, and they all sort of. I was able to speak. My kids were able to speak. My son-in-law was able to speak. We were all able to have our say about what Melissa's death meant to us.
That's a lot of life. That's a lot of people sharing a lot of who they are, how they felt. It brings all of this to life.
Yeah, it
celebrates the life, as well as giving voice, because I was saying earlier on the radio show, the three things that people generally don't seem to talk about are death, sex and money.
Let's talk about all of them.
And you have created a stage where pretty much everything is talked about, and this is Alternatives from 30 years ago. Yeah. How did Alternatives start? 30 years. I mean, that's before any of this was trendy.
36, 1982 it started.
Wow.
So I was dancing in a play called The Cosmic Celebration with Pir Vilayat Khan, the Sufi leader. And this was a story of the masters, saints and prophets through the ages. And the venue happened to be St James's Church, Piccadilly. I knew nothing about it. We were dancing in the church. But at the end of the play, Donald Reeves, who was the rector of the church, stood up and said, every church in the land should have a cosmic celebration. I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. And we talked about the possibility of having a series celebrating what was then called the New Age.
Right.
And we met regularly. 5 or 6 people would meet in the cafe and we talk about things.
That was it, 5 or 6.
That's how it started.
Now it's
things
thousands.
have to start organically. They start organically. And then a few years down the track, it started to grow. We had we started to get some good speakers, but Roger Houston ran the Open Gate Trust. And he and I had lunch together and we started talking about it. He was bringing across all the Americans from the States, and what he wanted was a platform where they could do their talk, which would publicize the workshops he was running for them.
Right.
So suddenly we're putting on Ram Dass, we're putting on Thich Nhat Hanh, we're putting on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, we're putting on a lot of the major players in the spiritual world. And suddenly, from being 5 or 6, which had grown to sort of probably 20 or 30 and 40 sometimes, we were regularly filling the church, 400 people. And it just has continued on from there. So we're putting on Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, who's now standing for the Democratic candidacy of the United States. And we've had all of these speakers. And it's been really useful to have all these speakers, because you then start to stop deifying these people. And Robert Johnson, who wrote a lot of books, He, She, We, The Psychology of Romantic Love, and many others, he talks about giving away your gold. And what I recognize is it's so easy to go, oh, wow, they're amazing, rather than to actually go, well, actually, we all have within us the capacity to be extraordinary human beings. And to give it to another human being is just to say, I'm not big enough to be that person.
Strangely, this reminds me of the guy in the men's group who couldn't feel his own grief and meet you as you felt Melissa's grief.
Yes.
I guess the same goes for the dark shadow as it does with the gold shadow.
Yeah. Well, the dark shadow is also the gold shadow, because actually our grief is also the transformational place. When we get crushed to pieces, Michael Meade said something very interesting. He said, in order to be fully evolved, not only do we have to have our heart broken once, we have to have it broken many times over. And interestingly, I was with Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and she came after her partner had died 5 months previously. And we went to tea when she came and did her talk, and we talked about loss. And we were able to connect in a really deep space because both of us had had a major loss. Yeah. And that was I realized the only way I really want to connect with people is through the heart. I'm not interested in people's high-flying ideals or ideas. I'm interested in people who have been transformed through their experiences and their hearts have been burst open.
It sounds like you're saying, who are you? Where are you coming from? And what have you been through? It's like that common ground of being alive, with the love and the fear and the loss and everything else, rather than the cleverness or the mask or the act or any of that nonsense. So tell us about your book. You've been hard at it for a few months.
I've been hard at it for quite a while. I started to try and write it. Well, I was inspired by Melissa's death to write. and I hadn't written a book since 2004 when I wrote Falling in Love, Staying in Love, which Piatka's published. And I started to work on this idea of that there are empaths. There are some people are empaths, and they're so sensitive, it's hard to be alive in the world because of the sensitivity where we get crushed. And interesting, Liz Gilbert, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, had done a TED talk on genius, where she said in the middle of the 20th century, a lot of people who were proclaimed geniuses either killed themselves by suicide or by addiction, drugs, drink, and whatever else.
Wow.
And so but what I see is that the addiction process is the sensitivity process that can't be handled and tries to get squashed.
So is this where people take the edge off so they can
take the edge off, because then you don't have to live with that enormous amount of feeling everything that goes on.
Yeah.
I know when I sailed on the Rainbow Warrior with Greenpeace back in the 70s, and I could feel the pain that was there in the various species we were trying to save, and it was too painful for me to. I stayed for 2 years. It was too painful for me. Yeah. And
wow.
It was an amazing, I sailed with the heroes, David McTaggart, who was the founder of Greenpeace, and I was sailing with these guys who were the swashbuckling, pioneering pirates who were fighting for the world back in the 70s.
I had no idea. You've got so many chapters and doorways.
Well, there's a few books in there that are ready to come. But what happened with the book is that I started to write a book about empaths. And in my year group at the time, I run a 1-year psychotherapy training. In my year group, there were three young people who were real empaths, and I thought, let's try and do something with them that will support other empaths. So we're going to come back in a little while to talk about those young people. I think does that
mean that we're having a break? What are you pointing at? I don't know what's going on here.
Don't bang the desk.
Oh, don't bang the desk.
Is that what he's saying?
I can't bang I use my hands, it's true. Thank you very
swear,
much.
but you can't bang the desk.
I haven't sworn yet, but I banged the desk a few times. Thank you very much for letting me know. I shall be careful. So there were these three young people, and actually one of them is a guy called Ben Crabe. And we said, let's write a book about empaths. Let's write a book so that we can actually educate people about what it is to be so sensitive and what you can do to protect yourself. So we cracked away at that for about a year, and it just didn't land. I kept trying to shoehorn things in. These are empaths, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I went to see Watkins' books, and I said, I want to write this book. And they said, well, if you're going to write a book, let's do this through a process. So we started to say, what is this book about? And we had to fill out their forms. And they said, if you can answer all these questions, you'll learn what your book's about. And it was a really good process, actually.
Great.
And then I recognized the book wasn't about empaths at all. And the book is now called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, and which is one of the chapters, and 10 Ways to Thrive in an Unstable World. And what we're doing with the book, so I couldn't do this without Ben. He is absolutely the person who is able to hold the container where I can use my words. He'll draw it out, he'll ask me the right questions, and he'll bring it into shape. He works for publishers,
right, and
he knows what he's doing in terms of writing and editing.
So are you co-writing?
No,
you're writing.
It's my book. He's writing.
Right.
So we go on. The way we were doing this, and it's taken quite a while to get to how we could do this, is that we go on Zoom twice a week for 2 hours,
right,
and we have a dialogue, and he gets it all down. He's a very quick typist as well, so we have this dialogue.
Yeah.
And our plan is that every 3 sessions, so 6 hours, we write a chapter, and that's what we've been doing. And so each chapter is a stream of consciousness, so about the actual pattern. So some of the habits that we are asking people to learn are to slay your dragons with compassion, to say the difficult things that need to be said in a way that can be heard. They are about finding a sangha. A sangha is a Buddhist term for a community. Can we find our community that will actually really support us in being able to live the life that we're potentially able to live?
Right.
They're about letting your relationships educate you. They're about bearing witness to each other, that actually if we truly listen and are listened to, we can create a space where something profound can happen.
Yeah.
They're about breaking the spell. So sometimes if a doctor says you've got 6 months to live, you're under a spell. That spell says to you, oh my God, I've got 6 months to live. What am I going to do with my time? And already you're preparing yourself to live 6 months.
You're winding down.
You're winding down. Now, a friend of mine was told exactly that by a doctor.
Yeah.
You've got 6 months to live. 18 and a half years later, he's still alive and thriving and well. And actually, he broke the spell. He decided, I'm not going to just follow. Medicine can do nothing for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to try the Gerber treatment for my cancer. So he went to Mexico with his girlfriend, and he went on this serious diet and cured his cancer. And he's still being paid out by the insurance company 18 and a half years on because he was given less than 18 months to live.
Wow.
And he's an extraordinary man. But he's done it through going, I am not going to submit to being told this is the spell you're under. You've only got 6 months to live.
Where did all of this come from? You have obviously been around. You've been around a bit.
You've been around, baby. Yeah. So,
and all the studies to be a psychotherapist. And
yep.
Did you, when you were a little boy, what did you want to do?
Well, interestingly, when I was a little boy, first of all, I wanted to be a doctor, and I think the healer persona has come through me with that.
Right.
Then I wanted to be a rabbi or a priest, so I think that I've done
put them
that
together
as well.
Somehow.
Yeah. So they all pulled together, and then I wanted to be an actor. And actually, it was that actor that I actually really wanted to play out in a stage. And I've created my own stage where it's basically high drama. I use my main tool is psychodrama.
Right.
So I'm managing to create this psychodramatic presentation. Psychodrama is where you play out, a bit like playback theatre, you play out stories. So say you're having a problem in your relationship, which I'm sure you never do, Kenny. She does. Of course she has a problem. She's never going to solve it. But if you were in my group and you were having a problem in the relationship, I'd say, okay, well, let's bring your wife present. Give me 3 words to describe her. And you'd say?
Beautiful, scary, and loving.
Okay, so then I'd say to you, choose someone in the group who can portray your wife. Right. And you'd look around the group, and it doesn't have to be someone who looks like her. It wants to be someone who feels something like her.
Yeah.
So you'd choose someone from the group. They would step into the centre of the group with you, and you would then have the dialogue that you would normally have, and you'd go through your stuff with all of your unconsciousness, and you'd then have her speak about what's truly going on for her. Now, there's something amazing about psychodrama. I've done thousands and thousands of them over the 35 years that I've been practicing as a psychotherapist. By the way, before I was a psychotherapist, I was an estate agent. So it was quite a process, actually. So one day, and this is not a pro-drug statement, one day a friend of mine invited me to come round and take LSD, acid. This is back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And there was this tiny little piece of blotting paper which I took, and actually, instead of he put on Pink Floyd, and everyone's sort of like flipping out, and all my mates are there, and suddenly I went, I'm not who I thought I was. The universe is actually a much grander place than I'd imagined, and I became what my friends would describe me as cosmic at that moment.
Right.
And I remember trying to talk to them, and they're going, "You're stone man, you'll come down in a while." And to this day, they still say, "You've never come down from that trip." But actually what happened is, and this is not an advisory thing, because actually what I believe now is that we need to practice meditation, we need to practice discipline in order to be able to bring ourselves to the bigger person we are. Because you can go visit through drugs. You can't stay there through that. And my whole aim is to help educate people to find their wholeness. I'm 69 years old now, and I feel more alive than I felt when I was 30. And because I've got purpose. And actually that's what we need, is we need to find purpose, we need to find belonging, we need to have confidence, and we need to have physical exercise we enjoy doing.
Easier said than done. Especially,
more practice needed.
I totally agree. And the number of men that I find are depressed due to lack of purpose, due to lack of, it's all, I guess, an addiction to am I safe, am I good enough, I'm going to be abandoned, humiliated, whatever. And it's that big switch from am I to I am, and a sense of self.
Well, interestingly, I mentioned 3 other things along with the purpose. So I've got a sense of belonging, we need a tribe, we need a sangha. Yeah. I mentioned also that physical exercise that you enjoy doing, because actually we need to keep our heart and lungs pumping so we can keep the aliveness going in ourselves. And I guess that's also out of the head and into breathing, embodiment, and getting grounded. Absolutely. Well, the monks in olden days, when they would flip out, the abbot would send them into the grounds to dig, so they would actually be using their bodies to bring them back into their bodies. One of my main teachers, a guy called Andrew Watson, who's a healer, he went through a period of about 18 months where he had a serious breakdown. And what he did is that every time it came in waves, and every time, even if it was 3 a.m, that he felt himself flipping out, he would stick his running shoes on and he would pound the streets until he came back into his body. And he did this again and again and again until he found himself. So not only is it about purpose, it's also about sort of a sense of belonging. We need to have our community, and also about having confidence. We need to have people we can genuinely share our lives with. We need to genuinely be able to be ourselves and to stay in a place of practice where we are not looking for someone to go, oh yeah, you poor thing, that's what happened to you. We're looking for someone to receive us. And I know that you have a real confidant in your wife. I know that that's absolutely true for you. And it's interesting that I now share a flat with my friend because he's a really good confidant. And so that's a very profound place for me to go. So I think that in order to find our purpose, we've got to see, when people come to me and say, I don't know what my purpose is, I would say, what are you passionate about? What inspires you? Because your purpose will be bound up somewhere in that. And
I also find that a question I often asked is, what happened? What is your wound? What would you like to put right?
Exactly.
For other people? And life is all about Columbo for me. What are the clues? What are the clues in your story? What are the clues in your heart? What are the clues in your fear? What are the clues left, right and centre? And very often it's off left field because, as you say, a lot of people go, no, not me, that's too big, that's too dangerous, that's not the way I was brought up. Right, now we need to go into a commercial break.
Boo.
Right, so we'll be right back after this break. You're listening to Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz on the Men's Radio Station. So 2 things strike me loud and clear. Number one, because we've talked about purpose and there are going to be a lot of people, a lot of blokes that go, okay, now I know how to fix it. I need a purpose and then I need to do my purpose. And I wonder about the pathway, because it sounds like you have been all over the place, but you have followed something, and I wonder how this comes into it, because I feel it's a very male thing to want to fix things and control things, where I feel that what you're talking about is flow.
Well, Carl Jung said something very interesting, and there was a book called Carl Jung, Wounded Healer of the Soul, and I read a piece in there that has stuck with me endlessly since then, and he said everything is synchronicity. So there is always a sign and a signal that's beckoning us. And my life has been lived like that, so I've followed the signs. You know, I grew up thinking, well, I should be in a profession. I started doing accountancy when I left school, and then after 18 months,
accountancy to estate agent.
And then I thought, well, my father wanted me to have a profession, and I thought, well, I want something a bit more juicy than that. So I went into what I thought was a radical move of becoming an estate agent, which was a semi-profession, but at least there, you know, you could earn money and blah blah blah. And it wasn't until I actually sort of had this. I think a lot of us get the possibility of a breakthrough in consciousness, and if we did a 10-day Vipassana retreat, for example, a Buddhist breathing retreat, you would probably get a breakthrough in consciousness, because you would be pushing away your persona over an extended period of time. I've just done 5 days of 6 hours a day meditation with Jack Cornfield in Montserrat, near Barcelona.
Wow!
Because we were organising it, I got to go for free and organise it. But it's
brilliant.
That was great, because it actually it gave me space to really look at who I was, take time.
And I guess
don't try and do your purpose, be your purpose.
And I find the big gift for me with men's groups is I get to see who I am in that moment. And I might have had a group a day before or a week before or a month before, but all the same, the question that I take is, who am I right now? Who do I no longer need to be? And I guess to an extent it's, how can I be of service? Which sounds all goody-goody, but to an extent it maybe is, how can I be of service to me? How can I be of service to love or to truth or even to my fear or to the people around? Or
let me give you a little poem that Rabindranath Tagore wrote about service. He said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and found that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. Now that sounds very Poe, but actually what I've discovered is when I'm doing my purpose and I'm in service to life as I see it, I'm delightedly happy.
yeah,
I'm far happier doing that than going on a trip around the world, or, where I can get a temporary buzz, or buying a new car or something like that. I feel in the flow of life, and I feel like I'm a contributor, in some ways a co-creator with the whatever the divine purpose is, when I'm doing what it is that I was born to do.
And how do you navigate signs from temptations? Because you said about following signs.
Go down the temptations as well. Let yourself be educated. That actually William Blake said. What was it he said? Because there's really quite a powerful quote. If I can't think of it, I'll tell you the essence of it. Basically what he said was that if we do something, if we go down the wrong road again and again and again, something about when we really go down the road of excess, it brings us to that's it. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. So there's something about not going down the wrong road, that there are no wrong roads. If we get burnt and we choose to get burnt again, then at some point we're going to go, that's enough. I need to stop doing this.
Yeah. And I have I guess a lot of experience of people who make a personality out of being burnt with the same thing over and over. This is who I am, this is all I'm worth, this is what I'm here to do, blah blah blah. What would you say to people who are in that loop?
Lighten up, arsehole.
And it really is as simple as that, I guess. It's like, break the spell and get living.
Actually, you've given me something for my chapter here. This is really good, because I've just remembered where that phrase came from. So a friend of mine, his wife had left him. He was a spiritual teacher. I'm not going to name him, but his wife had left him and gone off with another woman. And he was agonizing and blah, blah. And someone told him there was a wise man in the jungle tribes of somewhere or other. And if he went to this man, he could take away your pain.
Right.
So he set off and flew into sort of some godforsaken place that was in the middle of nowhere, and managed to track down this man. And for 2 hours, he sat there and spoke all about it. The man sat there, this tribal chief sat there in complete silence. And at the end of it, he looked at him and tapped him with a feather and said, "Lighten up, arsehole." and that's brilliant, because actually it's like somewhere along the line, I must remember that. Remind me, Kenny, can you?
It's recorded.
Oh, good, fantastic. Okay, because actually that was breaking the spell.
Yeah.
He was under this spell that he was in this terrible suffering because his wife had left him and she'd gone off with another woman, so he hadn't kind of been much of a man, and all the rest of this stuff. But actually what he needed was someone to go, "I'm not buying this crap."
It really can be as simple as that.
It can.
But as you say, this is where community comes in. And I guess, in a way, this is where, for me, unconditional love comes in, rather than, I need you to be like this, or you should be like that, or if you change, then what would happen to our relationship?
We have to be careful with the term unconditional love, although I like it. I like what you're saying.
Go on.
But I actually think it's not really available for us. If we think we're going to find a partner and they're going to unconditionally love us, or we're going to unconditionally love them, we're mistaken.
Yeah.
We may... And I don't think this is even true with our parents or our children. We may... I mean, I could never not love my children. But I think my liking of them is conditional on their behaviour.
Yeah.
And I actually think that we've got to go for a love that doesn't demand the other be different. But I think we've got to go for what's attainable in this human form. And I don't think that unconditional love is attainable in this human form.
And talking about love, Did Cilla Black model Blind Date on something that you did on TV a long time ago?
No, Cilla Black was before me, but
was she?
I did a series for Channel 4 called Made for Each Other,
right?
Where basically myself and a divorce lawyer,
yourself and a divorce lawyer,
were the co-presenters of this show for Channel 4, which is primetime Channel 4.
That is so cool.
It was amazing, and the way I got the job was also amazing. This is perfect synchronicity. So I'm a psychotherapist. I had specialised in relationships. I've done a lot of work with relationships, although my own are crap. But I have done a lot of work with them anyway. And I was contacted by Channel 4, a researcher, and she said, well, we're putting this new show, reality TV show together, and we're sort of, would you be interested? And I thought, I don't really want to do a reality TV show about relationships, but I thought, well, I'll go and see her. So I went to see her, and she said, well, I'll let you know. And she said, well, we've narrowed it down to 7 psychotherapists, and we want to put them with a divorce lawyer so that we can actually put CCTV cameras in a couple's house 24 hours a day. And we'll watch their relationship, and then you'll give them advice about what to do with their relationship.
Oh my God.
So they screen tested 7 psychotherapists. So I was the first of the 7, and I walked into the studio, and there's this divorce lawyer, Vanessa Lloyd-Platt, who's a very fearsome lawyer who's represented a lot of sort of celebrity figures and footballers and all this sort of stuff. And she's known as a real Rottweiler in the trade. So I walked into the studio, sat down, she looked at me, and she said, Mally, that was my nickname when I was a kid, and it's like we'd grown up together.
No.
So we had this amazing rapport on camera, and I was a shoo-in for the part of the therapist.
What
because we had this
buzz.
It was amazing. So we did a series in 2003, and we did another series in 2004, and it had pretty good viewing figures.
Wow.
And then, as often happens, TV moves on, and they went to the sex inspectors after that, which became a step on from what we were doing. But it was a very powerful process where these couples had CCTV cameras in their rooms, in all of their rooms, including their bedrooms.
That's outrageous. So you got to watch everything?
Well, no, I didn't do that. They had researchers who watched everything, and they narrowed it down for us to an hour, and they showed us an hour of material, and we then worked out what we could do. So we then brought the couple back into the studio after they'd had the 2 weeks of this, and we created some exercises for them to improve their relationships, to challenge with the things where we could see glaring faults. Now, what was quite interesting is that Vanessa, at one point, I was going to people, and I was talking to them and trying to see what's going on. I'm saying, "How do you feel right now?" Because I saw a crack, and then Vanessa thought, "Oh, that's good. I can see that." So she goes, "How do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel?" And it wasn't about how do you feel. It's about noticing the crack and drawing them out. Yeah. But actually, we were quite a good balance, because Vanessa was this outrageous blonde who would sort of like rant and rage, and I was actually sort of trying to tune in to where the places were where the relationship could be improved. And it was actually quite a powerful experience. And I really enjoyed the process of television.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Did you, with the book, the TV and everything else, how do you have an agent? Do you have?
I should have done. I never really capitalised on it. And I remember my cousin saying to me, "You're an idiot." He said, "You should have really, when you had the TV show, you should have an agent out there getting you something." I turned down Richard and Judy and all that sort of stuff. I didn't.
No.
I didn't want 5 minutes on television, and I just let it slide.
It sounds like you're not very seduced by fame and fortune.
I think I have been. I'm not anymore, really.
So you've matured out of it or something?
Oh, I'll probably become an old fart, actually. That's more true. But
and I was going to ask you about that, because another thing that I feel is rarely discussed is aging, conscious aging.
Yeah.
How has that been? And do you have any, basic tips? I mean, 2 things that I thought of, if anyone ever asks me, then I'm going to say, take care of your teeth. And take care of your eyes, and this includes things like, I don't know, smoking and brushing and flossing, but strange things like this make the world of difference.
I think as we age, it becomes more obvious that our bodies are not going to self-sustain. So at the age of 18, I can eat hamburgers and cokes and get pissed every night and get stoned when I did, and actually your body recovers very easily.
Yeah.
As you age, your body recovers that much less easily, and I think that at a physical level, I agree with you. Take care of yourself at a physical level. I take supplements.
Right.
Take supplements, but good supplements. They've got to be food quality that your body can ingest, as I've discovered.
Yeah.
So eat a healthy diet.
Is it that some people will only absorb certain brands or certain...
I don't think it's about brands. From my perspective, I think the body needs to recognize it as food. Otherwise, it just goes straight through the body.
I see.
I don't know. I'm not an expert on these things, but I know for myself, I want food quality supplements.
Yeah.
I also want to eat a healthy, organic, whole food diet, which doesn't mean vegetarian. And what it does mean is that actually you're eating food that feeds your soul. And we need a lot of plants. And if we feed ourselves a lot of plants, then we're starting to feed the organic structure of our body. So I'm 69. I've watched a lot of friends of mine fall around me in ill health. Now, I don't know whether maybe I'm lucky genetically, but I take care of my health. Then take care of the next layer of your health. Take care of your mental well-being. Do things that are actually going to feed your soul. So meditate. Do things that are going to slow you down, that are going to bring you into attunement with life.
And do you have any tips for meditation? Because I know
Breathe.
a reason. It's as simple as that, really.
Breathe.
I feel there are so many people who, instead of breathing, power think.
That's not meditation. That's power thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, you might be able to blast your way through, but I actually think there's something about becoming whole with yourself, in effect, marrying yourself. So you start to get to terms with the different parts of yourself. And meditation is a powerful part of that. It doesn't have to be sitting in meditation. It could be Tai Chi. Do what speaks to your soul.
Right.
So if you do Qigong every day, a friend of mine has just gone crazy on Qigong because he's finding it's really bringing him into alignment with himself. Find what it is that tunes you in. We need to retune this human instrument regularly,
Right.
so that it actually works well for us. Because one thing is for certain, we are going to die.
Yeah.
And one of the chapters in my book is called Befriending Death. And we are going to die, and actually we need to come to terms with it before we're dying. And I think that we have to face death. There's a meditation I often do on an app called Insight Timer. And it's called Imagine Yourself Dying of Terminal Cancer. And it's not morbid. It's actually sort of coming to terms with the fact that at some point you'll let go of all this worldly stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll get to this place where you're embracing, facing death. And in the chapter I've written about befriending death, I've talked quite a lot about friends of mine who've gone through the process of either dying and coming to terms with it, being educated by death, being educated by ill health. All that we're doing on earth is educating ourselves. And Robert Louis Stevenson said, to be who we are and to become what we can become, that's the sole purpose in life. And I really believe that. So I think that actually we've got to stay as well as we possibly can, and we've got to be as wise as we possibly can. We've got to put ourselves in situations that feed our soul and to grow ourselves into what it is we can become. And then death doesn't become this terrible fear. And Melissa's death helped me to start to come to terms with death. And my parents have both died. When my father died, it was really interesting. This is an amazing story that happened. Actually, I must put this in my book as well. I'm glad we've got this on tape. So when my father died, it was the 28th of December 2011. He was 91 years old. And my friend John had a party, a birthday party that day in Brixton, which I was going to. And I woke up that morning and I had flu. And I waited till lunchtime, and then I rang him and I said, John, I'm sorry, really sorry, I'm ill, I can't come. An hour later I had a phone call from the nursing home where my father was saying, I think you need to come. There was no flu. I went to the nursing home, which was 15 minutes drive away, and I was there for the last 45 minutes of his life, which I would have missed if I'd gone to the party. And I sat with him, and my mother and sister were in the room, and I sat with him and I had my hand on his heart. And I had my hand on his heart as it stopped beating. And there was such a powerful connection with his death. It was like I felt privileged to be in the room with him. I felt privileged to be in that space. My father was a lovely man. The Dalai Lama said, and I said this in his eulogy, the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. And I said, on that basis, my father was one of the most religious men I've ever met. And he was a very kind man. And I knew that my father didn't want to die on his own. I knew that from the dialogues we'd had. So I had my hand in his heart, and I was really with him, and I was also playing him beautiful music, because the last thing to go is the hearing, sense of hearing. Yeah, it's the last thing before you die is the sense of hearing. So if someone's in a coma, talk to them, because that hearing is the last thing that can come to them.
The scene of you being connected with him as he transitions, as he leaves his body. And I've heard this so often, that the greatest fear is being alone, being isolated, not being held, not being, I guess it's quite simply connection.
Well, interesting. I had another very interesting experience that happened to me around death, which was when I was working in an old people's day centre, and when I left being an estate agent, I tried everything because I wanted to sort of like serve the world. So Sail and the Rainbow Warrior, worked in an old people's day centre, spent some time working in a terminal cancer hospice, and a whole range of different things, because I wanted to be in service. But when I worked in the old people's day centre, there was a woman there. There were also people who lived there residentially. There was a woman there who was blind, and had been blind for about 40, 50 years. And one day I went into her room to see her. She was in her 90s, and she said to me, "I saw my sister and my mother last night. They came to me."
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, that's really amazing." And she said, "And I saw this room." And she then proceeded to describe the room she was in, which she'd never seen because she was completely blind. And death had come to visit her, and she died a few days later. And it was I felt shivers go through my spine as she said this, because there was no way she could have known what this was. And so I think there's something about befriending death that actually brings it. That's also got to go. I'm getting some great material here. Thank you very much, guys. This is great.
So one thing we do in the shows, and I know that you've been just oozing wisdom and tips.
Oh, bullshit, who knows?
Well, it's handy for me.
Good.
3 tips, life tips. And it could be 3 of your favourite bits of the book, or whatever crosses your mind. Anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, there's always things on top of my head. My head's a sewage pit and a great radiant place, so it's both. So let's see what's going to come out with my 3 tips. Well, the first is slay your dragons with compassion. Learn to speak to people in a way that they can receive you. Even when there are difficult things to say it with respect for the other person. And let them receive your love rather than your judgment. That would be tip number 1. Tip number 2 would be practice kindness. It's a very simple thing, and it's a really difficult thing to do. There are times when we get triggered and we want to treat people like, "You bastard," or whatever it is. As I said, the way I felt about my Melissa's mother was not a place of kindness I was coming from. But what broke it through was I found a place of kindness. So practice kindness. Make that a daily practice. Go out in the streets and see that, maybe you're not going to give money to the beggar who's sitting on the street, but don't shut them out of your life. Take a look at them and let your eyes meet theirs and see there's another soul there, and practice kindness. And then when you want to give money, you give money to them. The third would be my friend Ram Dass. He said, "We're all walking each other home." He was one of my great teachers, and recognise that we're all on a journey which is temporary in a human body, and befriend people around you. Make sure that you create community around you, and that you are allowing death to come and visit you, and not to be kept at bay.
Do you know, I remember seeing Ram Dass. I've got high in alternatives quite a few times, and for me...
You mean you've been taking drugs there, you bastard?
Not yet.
No.
But I remember it happened with Ram Dass, it happened with Marianne Williamson. Very few, but it's a certain frequency. It even happened with, what's that woman's name? It's the wrong way around, and it's...
Byron Katie.
Yes, the one. But there's something about the frequency, the space that they hold and the frequency that they reach, where I kind of feel quite high, and my eyes flutter, and I know it's coming in at various levels. And it's absolutely wonderful to be in that space. And I have no idea where I was going with this, because I've totally forgotten.
I mean, I can add to what you're saying as well, because there are people in whose presence we feel enriched and uplifted. And can we become the person in whose presence others feel enriched and uplifted?
Yeah.
I hope I am becoming that person. But what I do know is that when I saw the Dalai Lama speak, I can't remember one word he said, But I remember being so touched by being in the presence of this man of depth. And the same thing with Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, who was nominated by Martin Luther King for the Nobel Peace Prize in the 60s for his non-violent resistance to the Americans in Vietnam. And there's something about the presence of people, and they've normally been through an enormous amount of suffering to get them to where they need to be.
Yeah.
We don't become who we are without being molded by suffering. But if we're molded by suffering and we don't become bitter, then we can start to become whole, and we can start to allow ourselves to bring through the essence of who we all are. Because at the essence of all of us is beauty and is love. But it's so shrouded for some people because the bitterness is set in, and the anger and the feeling of, like, fuck you to everybody, that they lose that place. I've just tried to get a few swear words in at the end because I normally swear quite a lot. But I wanted to know that I'm a person who swears. But actually there is something extraordinary about being in their presence. And I know the same's true for you, Kenny. And I know that in your presence, that actually I feel a sense of a raising of my energy. So we feed, people feed each other, and then you create community that feeds off each other, not like parasites, but like you get uplifted, and you bring through the best of who you are.
I was exactly the same at the Dalai Lama. I
think so me, but the Dalai Lama will do.
And also that hugging
Amaji,
oh my God. And it is so high that maybe I can't take it by being conscious at this level, so I'll take it at a different level. And I wondered two things. One of them is there is a stage in life, it seems, and apparently it happens around the teens, when people want to be more, to experience more, there is more. And this is where people can often get high with drugs or drink or sex or whatever. And it seems that there's something else that they're seeking. So I wonder on one hand whether you have anything to say on that and how to harness that. And for me, getting high through meditation, as you say, is claiming my path and owning that place rather than a quick boost up, check it out through the window, but I'm not actually part of it, and then I have to pay the energy back.
You do, but that's the learning as well. So I think everything in its own time. I don't think mostly people in their teens or their 20s are not really ready for meditation. They've got to go through enough life experience to bring them to the point where actually life has humbled them enough.
Yeah.
Because I know that my son is a very bright boy and he's in his 30s. He knows everything. He's very bright, and actually he does know a lot, but actually he will go through whatever he has to learn in order to, we all have to be humbled. And Melissa's death humbled me. And in the process of humbling, it leads me to then seek more deeply for the real meaning of life, because I'm not going to be able to get past her death by taking a holiday in the south of France.
And I guess there's knowing and there's being.
Yes.
And for me, that's my maturity. And when I knew, it was almost like I felt I should know because I was surviving and I needed to do it right. And the other thing that I was going to bring up is the whole, what do they call it, spiritual bypass, where I shouldn't feel angry, I should feel love. I should this, I should that. And then surely there's some sort of a suppression or disassociation from the negative feelings and the performance of the positive ones. And where does that leave things?
I think that stuff is the biggest bollocks that you can ever sort of get involved with, because there is a sort of a whole stream of philosophy that believes that we should try and aim to just be high and holy. And actually, for me, the real human beings are the ones who are coming to terms with their anger, so who have some choices around it, but who don't betray it. James Hillman wrote a book, 100 Years of Anger and the World's Getting Worse. 100 Years of Therapy and the World's Getting Worse. And what he said in that book was that we have taken our anger to the therapy room, so we're not using it to try and make some sense in the world of what's going on. Actually, that's changed recently. I am so impressed with the climate change rebellion, with Greta Thunberg, with the young people who are standing up and actually saying, get angry, get enraged, do not just believe the bullshit you're being fed. I think anger is an essential to, and I learned this with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's the doyen of death and dying. And she said anger is an absolutely natural emotion, and to pretend it doesn't exist in us is to squash down a part of who we are. For me, it's becoming whole. The whole process is about learning to grieve, learning to rage, learning to embrace the wholeness, the fullness of who we are, and finding relationships around us that are going to support who we are, and they're going to help us raise our vibrational energy. It's not going to get raised by pretending we're not angry.
Yeah.
And if I meet someone, I remember being in a relationship with someone, or in partnership with someone in a business I was involved with, and he said, "You're going to really like working with me. I haven't got angry in the last 20 years." And I thought, I am in real trouble here.
Was that an invitation? Right, here's a cage to rattle.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I'll come out there doing that and actually when we used to sort of have conflicts in our business environment, he would say, well, let's take some silence around this. And I'd go, fuck you. I don't want to be silent around this. I actually want to nut it out and really have this really spoken with all of the feelings that are there as well, not to find some spiritual way of dealing with the stuff that goes on for us as human beings.
I love the way that you bring mind, body, spirit and balls to the table, because it feels like it's having the courage to actually live it.
I've just realised I had an operation on one of my testicles when I was 8, and that must be why my balls are big. So that's
like that guy from Viz with
the
wheelbarrow.
Yes. Must go now.
Exactly.
Yes.
Your first tip really struck something with me, because I remember when nonviolent communication first came on the scene, and it was the most passive-aggressive tool going, probably after NLP. And the key that I found with nonviolent communication is the first step is the heart connection.
Yeah.
And then from there it can start. And that was just like gold dust.
Yeah. If you and I disagree, and we are fiercely on opposing sides of something, if I see you as the enemy, I'm going to want to make you wrong, and then we're going to raise the energy of conflict. So the way I see conflict, and I teach this in corporate world, so you get angry and you slash out at someone, they come back at you, and you keep raising the energy higher and higher, whereas at some point you have the choice to go, okay, so say, let's put this in the context of a relationship, and so in a relationship, if you are in a screaming match with your partner, and I'm sure that never happens for you, Kenny, but if you're in a screaming match with your partner, and actually you lay down your armour at that stage and you show some vulnerability and you find the place inside you that's not going to go to war. I have never been savaged in that place. I've been savaged many times in the place where I've asserted my rights, but if I choose not to go to war, I've never been savaged in that place.
Sadly, we have come to the end of this show.
Well, fuck you.
Happily, you can fuck me for the rest of my life and yours. And who knows who's going to die first, but it really doesn't matter. I am absolutely blessed, not just to have you as a role model, but also someone who I feel I can learn from, I can laugh with, I can be scared of, and James is pointing at his watch and I have to shut up now. So it's good night from me.
And fuck off from me.
You're listening to Kenny Mammarella-D'Cruz on the Men's Radio Station.